Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Alder Hour, your favorite way to end your working day. So it's 8 o'clock here in the UK. If you're watching in Europe, it's probably 9 o'clock or even later. It is midday on the West Coast, 3 p.m. on the East Coast. So great to have you join us. If you're watching the show live, please join in, make some comments. We'll try and read them out on air. This show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. If you head over to purpleacornnetwork.com after the show, you can learn more about Purple Acorn. You can also follow Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. This episode will be available as a podcast afterwards, as are all of Purple Acorn's shows. And you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. So I would like to start off by saying hello to this week's co-hosts, if they could join me up on the stage, or the virtual stage, like the TV stage, whatever it is. So, hey, hi, Rhona, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
I'm all right. Yes, I'm very, very good. It's a crazy week, and it's only Monday, but yes, it's cool. And hey, Robin, welcome to the show.
I know. Hello, Matt. Hello, Rhona. It's great to be here, and I should have thought to dig out my Purple Acorn, Christmas hat to wear, but I didn't plan very well.
I was wearing mine well into January. It was, do you know what? Hats never fit. Hats that people send me never fit me, and it's the only hat ever, Christmas hat ever, that's fitted. So I was tempted to wear it all year, but I thought that was probably not appropriate. So it's great to kind of have you on the show. What are we talking about this week, Rhona? What do you have for us? What do you have for us this week?
Well, we're talking about all the executive orders that are impacting DEI and what we can do about it. I'm excited. I have a guest today, so it's cool.
Oh, fantastic! Looking forward to that. And Robin, what are you going to be talking about today?
Well, we're going to dive in and have a little bit of a discussion about is it right or wrong to lie on your resume?
It's interesting and perhaps a more nuanced topic than people think. So great show coming up. We've got another guest as well. So we've got two guests and a guest host. It's all happening. So please, if you're watching, send us a comment. Tell us how fantastic we all look, or join in the debate. So at that point, let's go to Points and Pints. Now, so if you've not watched the show before, in this section, I pour myself a pint of beer, or nearly a pint of beer, and we discuss some of the headlines that we've seen around this week. So I think originally when we kind of devised this, I was going to drink alcoholic beer, but I seem to set the trend for drinking non-alcoholic beer. And this morning I was listening on the radio. There was an interesting discussion that apparently 50% of young people, and I presume they mean people kind of over 18, in the UK do not drink alcohol. So by having an alcohol-free beer, I am down with the kids, which is where you want to be if you're my age. Now, I've had this one on the show before, but I'm going to have it again. It's brewed by a company called Northern Monk here in the north of the UK. It's called Holy Faith, and it's an alcohol-free hazy pale ale. So if I can open it. There we go. I already know what this one tastes like, and it's great. So I feel sorry for all of you that you don't have your own. I think they probably export as well, so you should definitely try some. So amazing. So that's the pint, or the half pint. On to the points. So our first headline: recent college grads are not ready for work. HR leaders are fed up. I think HR leaders are always fed up, aren't they? This is a really interesting one. I think it comes on from one of the things we were talking about last week in terms of skills. Now, I want to share the survey results because they're quite interesting in this particular article. So they surveyed 800 HR leaders, and apparently, according to this survey, I don't know much about where these HR leaders were or what sectors they were in, but 9 out of 10 companies were actively avoiding hiring recent graduates because they didn't feel they had the skills that they needed to be in the workplace. And so 45% of these HR leaders were opting to hire freelancers instead. 45% also said that they were looking for retired employees. 37% said robots were the answer. And 30% would rather leave a position unfilled than hire a recent graduate. So it's I mean, there's so much going on here. I think it's there's a whole question about the education system. Is it the job of the education system to get people ready for work, to give them the skills that they need, which is which is a debate. I think something we were talking about before. Probably more prescient for me is this just about the fact that employers don't want to train people anymore? Is that what this is about? Is it that they don't want to train people anymore? They would just rather hire, someone they perceive to have the right experience every single time. And then the other thing that I think is interesting is this just about a flawed recruitment process? Is it that they are trying to assess people's experience and ability to show that they've done the job in the past? And obviously, if you're a new graduate, you won't be able to do that, rather than looking for, the kind of the longer term, skills that people have, their attributes, the kind of things that could indicate that they would be a fantastic hire for this organization. And perhaps they just don't have the ability or the willingness to measure that. So, I mean, there's lots of things there, aren't there? Rhona, what do you think?
I mean, to me, this is textbook what I call lazy recruiting. And also, companies, like you said, not willing to train. And that's really going to hurt them in the long run, because even experienced people, things are changing so fast. We've seen AI, we've seen so many things be introduced into the workforce. So if you don't train, if you don't have that culture of learning and development, like training your people, it's going to hurt you in your retention anyway. But I think that's really the main reason when people don't want to hire new grads. In my experience, it's always been, well, we don't have time to train them. Well, we need to make time. Also, it's interesting to me in this time where we're talking, at least HR tech vendors, so much about skills-based hiring, that this is a problem right now. Because what do you mean? If we're hiring skills-based and everything's moving towards that, then new grads are really where you can assess that and really get the most out of that. So
No, absolutely. I think, as you say, it's kind of, if we stop training young people coming into the workforce, then there's some kind of demographic time bomb going on where there won't be retired people or experienced people, or maybe all jobs will be done by robots. I mean, it doesn't bode well for the future. Robin, what's your view on this?
What this reminds me of is the same old tired talk about generations that we cycle through over and over and over again. And we could have read this headline 20 years ago. And the reason given would have been the new college grads are spending too much time on their phone and on their technology instead of engaging. And now in 2024, we're saying, they're, maybe they're not they don't know how to engage with us anymore or something, but we require them to be on technology. I mean, it's the same, every 10, 15, 20 years, we go through the next generation as a problem. And that's what it speaks like to me.
Yeah.
No matter the underlying reasons, which to Rhona's point as well, it's always been a matter of taking the time and building that into your organizational hiring process, your development process, your culture is, we're always going to need to be training, whether they be new grads or whether they be seasoned folks that are coming in from another industry, whatever.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about a generation here that are the most digitally savvy people on the planet, and probably the most AI savvy people on the planet as well. There's a huge amount of skills, there's a huge amount of value there that companies are overlooking. And I kind of that the point about the generations is really interesting. I think anyone listening who's old enough to remember trying to get a job in the 1990s, it was like Generation X are all slackers. They don't like doing work. They're the slacker generation, all this kind of stuff. So we've kind of seen it. We've seen it before, but I think it's it's a shame that we're still, like we said last week with the skills article, it's a shame that we're still seeing this kind of these kind of attitudes towards this. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the second headline. Okay, the myth of replaceability. So this is an article. It's someone's perspective on the fact that they're suggesting that companies think everyone is replaceable. And, you're not necessarily valuing the talent that people have. There's an underlying subtext about people being commodities and all that kind of stuff. But they talk about one particular example where someone left the business and they actually had to hire 3 people to replace them because it turned out they were irreplaceable. And I think, again, it throws up some really interesting ideas. So there's a bit in there about retention, a lot in there about rethinking succession planning in terms of the right training and all of those kind of things. So that's kind of quite a lot in this article. But I think the replaceable irreplaceable thing is also interesting because I wonder why that person was irreplaceable. And I bet it wasn't because of their kind of hard skills and experience. I bet it was because of their ability to, build connections, build agreement, have a network where they kind of knew everyone, right? Essentially kind of sort of human traits. Because that's certainly been my experience when I've worked with people who provide this huge value to the company and they're really missed when they go, that it's kind of more about those kind of skills than their actual sort of their actual experience. And then the flip side for me is that there are companies who think they have irreplaceable people who are not irreplaceable, and actually they'll tolerate bad behavior and a toxic culture just desperately trying to keep this person in the business when actually you could probably easily replace them and kind of improve things. Robin, what's your take on this particular topic?
Yeah, I think quite often it is, to your point, there's sort of this human element around what is causing someone to be viewed as irreplaceable, perhaps. And that's the tendency. I've seen this a lot in a lot of organizations in name a department / profession. I've seen it in there where the individual, they may be great, they may be smart, they may be brilliant, they may have some unique skills or capabilities, but they also are the hoarder of knowledge and or insight, and they get power from that. And so if the organization does not require them or equip them or make it easier for them to share, collaborate, brain dump, whatever you want to call it, you're going to have these hoarders who then over time do appear to be irreplaceable. But we, the organization, have sometimes created that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Rhona, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with both of you. And like you said, there's 2 sides of it. So that person that they felt was irreplaceable is probably someone who, like you said, had more of those soft skills, someone who's creating process, who's always seeing the bigger picture and, oh, we could do it this way. We could do it this way. We've all worked with that person. Some of us are that person. So yes, when they leave, you feel, because they were just going so above and beyond their role that they were doing things that the company didn't even really think they needed. So that's why it feels that way. And it's not necessarily that the person was irreplaceable. They were just stellar. And then on the other side, yeah, like you said, there's people, and in my experience, I think the more toxic the person, the better they are at making others or making the right people feel that they are irreplaceable.
Yeah.
And that's what they really spend their entire energy on, instead of actually like not being an a-hole. They spend their time on making others think that they are irreplaceable and they are the hoarders of all this information. Yeah.
And I think all of us can identify at least one person that we've worked with like that. Thank you very much. Quite the situation. Let's go on to the Situation Room. I love that music. It's so dramatic. So, Robin, this is, with that dramatic introduction, what do you have for us?
I do love that music, and we feel like we're on in a really super secret situation room. So here's a again, something that has surfaced in the past, and I think we've folks have talked about it in the past, but um, it's kind of risen to the surface. I've seen this in a couple of different areas lately, and that's the conversation around, as the job market is shifting and uncertain, and is it an employer's world now? What should candidates do to prepare? What should job seekers do? And the question is, should candidates, should individuals lie on their resume? Should they falsify their resume? And we found this subreddit, which was a huge conversational topic for folks. And this particular person was a recruiter applying for a job in HR, for an HR quote HR job. And the director, according to the candidate, the director of HR is the one who told them, gosh, you should have, I think you could do this job, but I think you should have lied on your resume. Because, your title doesn't really line up, and I don't even know why I'm talking to you, because this is not going to fly. So it kind of surfaced the question in an interesting way. But, question number one, that I kind of want to get your take on as well is should people lie? Should you ever lie on your resume? Now, my answer is no. Never lie. And we're talking things like company name, dates of employment. I mean, those things that are facts. They are not, quote, fake news. They are the truth. Because those are the things that, yes, they're very boring, but those are also the sorts of things that might be very automated for some sort of employment verification. And I have just seen folks over the years lose out on a job because of those most factual things. No, you never worked at XYZ company. Usually it's often an embellishment, if you will, of the dates more than anything. I do think, though, and I don't want to use the word lie because I don't think it's lying. I think there's a time and a place, though, for some things on your resume or, sort of that first piece of introduction to an organization. When you're the job seeker, it is okay to embellish a bit because you're trying to provide clarity. Remember, your resume is a marketing document, right? So you're marketing yourself. You're not manufacturing yourself. You're not making yourself up, but you are marketing yourself. So I think title and duties are places where you can add you can zhuzh it up a little bit, right? Title, and it infuriates me that title becomes such a stupid sticking point that somebody's going to look at a title and put somebody in the no pile based on a title, but it happens. And so one example I think of is an accountant. I work for an organization, and we have accountants 1, 2, and 3, and my title is accountant 2. What does that tell you? Absolutely nothing. So, maybe I'm a real estate tax accountant. You know what? On my resume, I'm going to make that my title. And I'm going to reference, maybe parentheses, accountant 2, something like that. But I'm going to clarify what I do in my title so that somebody, if they are looking at title on my resume, it's a little clear. And the same with job duties. I'm not going to make something up that I've never done or have no responsibility for. But if something does fall within the scope of my job, even if I'm not doing it every day, but I've been trained on it, or they're leading me to doing. That accountant, and I'm learning how to do the monthly reconciliations for XYZ accounts. Maybe I've been trained on that, and I'm going to start doing it as part of my job. I'm not fully doing it now, but I'm gonna include that somehow if that's a pertinent part of my job. So again, it's making, with hiring and interviewing is a game. So let's play the game. Win.
Yeah, and I
Got
think
together,
yeah, no, exactly. I think there there is, it's like what you define as lying. I think that's the thing. And I think you kind of nail it there with things like company names and times and all
Right,
that sort of stuff. But also, I think there's an interesting thing about what is it that makes people feel they have to lie on their
right.
resume. And I think the interesting example here is that gap. We've got a gap between
Yes.
jobs, and that it's still lots of hiring managers, lots of recruiters see that as the the greatest, the worst thing that could ever happen. And
Right.
it's kind of nonsense that those kind of beliefs are still
Mhm,
out there. And also
mhm.
things like where skills that someone's got in a very similar job are valued over transferable skills and
Right,
things like that. So I think
right.
there's a bigger picture around why people feel they have
Mhm,
to, they have to lie on their resume in the first place. And
mhm,
also, um,
mhm.
as you say, it's a game. If people are embellishing stuff, if people are lying, then is this really the best way to recruit people? So
Right.
I think there was, there's sort of a number of sort of different things like that. I mean, what do you think of resumes in general? Do you think that we should keep them? Do you think that we should rethink them? What do you think?
I mean, think about, we kind of lost track of that conversation that we were having X number of years ago about having these universal applications, right? Whatever happened to that, where we were going to get away with resumes?
Yeah.
Um, I think, we do. I think resumes are not dying. Resumes are not dead. I think they are here for a lot longer than a lot of um, TA pundits would have liked to, have them around for. But they, especially when you're small, mid-sized businesses, especially that
Mm.
they rely on it. They rely on, give me this a PDF of your resume. That's what they want. Send that to me via email. Um, they're not dead. They are still the entree into an opportunity for a lot of people, depending on the organization, depending upon the size of the company or the industry. They might take a different format. Oh, yeah, go check out my website. Go look at this,
Yeah,
PowerPoint
I mean,
together.
yeah,
But
it is nuanced, definitely, because I just think that they are useless for the actual recruitment process. But I actually ran a poll on LinkedIn last week about, is the resume dead? Should we, have you moved on, or all this kind of stuff? And actually, in the comments, there were some quite sort of nuanced responses about, well,
mhm,
actually, I'm a candidate. I want to put myself forward
mhm,
speculatively to a company. What do I send?
mhm.
All job boards would fall apart if there weren't
Mhm.
resumes. So there's, it's a kind of a multifaceted
It
thing.
really is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Um, and again, in a lot of cases, um, they are still required. A lot of, again, small mid-sized businesses, especially, still requiring them. I want to pop in because we have a comment on the gap issue on resumes, because just as all these other things that, oh my gosh, Susie was out of work for 6 months or a year. I can't believe we are still having that conversation and dismissing the humanity behind people's lives. I mean,
and
I
the reality
the
of what
reality, yeah.
things are like these days as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still will run into situations and say, oh well, why did they stop working in 2020? Hello, remember what we were doing in 2020? And then of course it took them
Yes,
6 8 months
exactly.
to
Yeah.
get a job. Well, what did they do during
Yeah.
that time? It shouldn't matter at the end of the day why somebody wasn't working. People have gaps for any number of reasons. And to the comment of, what if you're a caregiver, you're a parent,
Mm.
or you're you're spending time taking care of something not work related. So you may have made that choice to step out of the workplace. The choice may have been made for you if you were part of a RIF or something. But why is that so awful? Again, this is not, we've had this conversation forever. If someone has not been, quote, in the workforce for 6 months, 12 months, have they really lost all that much mojo? I don't think so.
Exactly. And it's because it's always an argument about, oh well, things have moved on really quickly, so the world has moved. But it's like things move on so quickly, even people who are in work can't keep up with them.
Right. I'm at work nonstop, and
I'm still working, and I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Robin, I could talk about this for hours, and I could talk to you for hours as well. But we best moved on. So thank you very much for bringing that to us, and let's move on to our guest. Hi, Nadia. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm very good. I've finished my non-alcoholic beer, so I'm feeling suitably refreshed. Could you start by introducing yourself and telling everyone what you do?
Sure. I'm Nadia Murdoch. I'm a mindset and movement coach. I help women in business regain their vitality so that they can step into their ultimate confidence. So I love all the topics that have been coming up because the toxicity, being unique in the workplace, all this stuff, this is definitely stuff that I've touched upon with my coaching.
Fantastic. And do you work with individuals? Do you work with companies? How's it work?
I do one-on-one coaching, but mainly corporate wellness at this point, predominantly gearing towards women in the workplace, how they can utilize their voice, how they can activate their self-care in business, and talking amongst all those topics.
Fantastic. And I want to dive into some of those topics in a second. I suppose before we do, though, can you sort of break down corporate wellness for us? Because it's something that's obviously talked about all the time. And I suspect that people might not necessarily understand the constituent parts of it or, really kind of what goes on. Just kind of break it down for us a little bit.
Sure. I think each business and each corporation has their own take and approach on it, but it's really pouring back into their employees, ideally, through different activations, events, wellness perks, and things of that nature. So sometimes, for example, a lot of companies will have different committees like a philanthropic committee, a wellness and health and wellness committee. And that's where I'll come in and give a talk on any specific topic that they really feel their team needs to be addressed.
And what are the big themes you're seeing at the moment? Is work kind of really stressing people out? Is it where are the sort of the pain points? What's the kind of experience like for everyone at the moment?
Stress is always the number one thing that they come to me for, but I like to come with a unique perspective on other topics that they may be overlooking, such as imposter syndrome, light work-life balance, utilizing your voice, creating a holistic place of work. I think these are things that they don't typically think of. Stress is always going to be top of mind, but I like to pull out some of the unspoken stuff that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, of course. I mean, imposter syndrome is really a really interesting one. How does that affect the people that you kind of work with?
Well, I think it kind of quiets their voice, right? People are feeling like they don't belong, or maybe they shouldn't go for that promotion, or they shouldn't speak to their HR manager about a particular topic. Who am I to say something? That feeling of being inadequate. And so therefore, everyone's not playing on the same level. And so therefore, you're feeling a sense of dissatisfaction. You're unhappy with where you work. You don't feel seen or heard. And that can cause someone not to really show up. They're present, but are they showing up as their full selves?
And is it a very individual thing? Are there things that could work on a more general level for people when it comes to that? In terms of making it better or making them able to fulfill their potential and show up and use their voice and all those sort of things.
So when I was in the corporate space, I feel like everyone's thinking the same thing, but nobody's talking about it. So I think the most important thing is creating a safe space and allowing people to share their thoughts, reflection, and letting them know that there's no repercussions for sharing your thoughts and however that may look. I think as honest as you can create that environment, it not only helps with longevity and less turnover, but people start to show up and want to work there. And I think that's the type of workplace we want, right? We want to feel like, okay, I said something to the HR manager, I don't have to worry about getting fired, And I think the more you have that, the more you have people referring out the business, talking about the business. Word of mouth is everything.
Mm,
And I
mm.
think it's more than just checking off a box. It's about really pouring back into your employees and not thinking that they're replaceable, as you said in an earlier segment, right? Like
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
person brings their own zest and it should be honored and seen as such.
No, exactly. And it's just important to get the best out of everyone. And I think you can only do that if they're happy and they're healthy and they're engaged.
Right. And it's more than just, okay, you get some money back off your gym membership. It's about like really honoring, having healthy stuff in the break room, saying it's okay if you leave early because you're feeling stressed out, allowing work from home days, allowing walking meetings. I know one company, they take their meetings on walks and like encouraging that. Just like a parent, you set an example. So if HR managers are doing it, then the ones beneath will do it as well.
And how important is walking and movement in kind of all of
Ugh,
this in terms of that sort of overall wellness?
it's so important. And I think people think walking's not enough, but if you just add walking to your regular routine, it makes such a difference. People are calling each other, and like if you just got up from your desk and walked down the hall and did that more than just ringing each other or sending a message, that small change makes such a difference. And again, it's like setting an example. And it's not about losing weight or a competition. How many steps did you do? It's about a lifestyle, and I think the more that the language can be changed, the more it will stick.
Mm, mm. And I've recently been reading about the importance of sleep in all of this, because it's certainly something that I know lots of people, myself included, tend to neglect, but it's kind of central to everything, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's not just sleep, man, it's like restful sleep. Like
Yeah.
you could go to bed, but if you're waking up every so often, it's almost equivalent to 3 hours sometimes. So figuring out a better sleep regime and like how can you make it better? Like blackout curtains, have meditative music, have the lavender diffuser going, whatever works for you may not work for someone else. But I think the way we pour into other things in our lives, sleep is so, so important.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've recently bought this device that tracks my sleep, and I found exactly that. I thought I was getting 6, 7 hours sleep a night. I was getting 2 or 3 because it wasn't sort of quality. So I think that it's great that we live in a world where we've got access to a lot more data about these kind of things as well.
Yeah, and it's like you have the data, now what? Like now you start to figure it out. It's like you become your own investigator. Like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have water before bed. Maybe I should put my phone down a lot sooner before bed because blue light can mess up how you sleep. So like just really learning the way you pour into any project at work, you are your own project. You should pour into yourself the same way.
And the news is full of companies doing things that seem to go against people's kind of well-being. So mandatory return to work policies and all of these kind of things. And I know that actually certainly in the UK where I am, if you take a step back, that is actually a minority of just kind of loud voices. But do you is there a kind of a really sort of positive movement towards wellness with employers, or are they kind of sort of stepping back from it now that we're 5 years away from out of the pandemic? What's the sort of the situation out there?
No, we're seeing it here too. There was a great quote I saw from one of the leaders at Spotify. She said, our employees are not children. We will continue to work remotely. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, like I feel like 2020 proved that we can efficiently work remotely. And so I feel like me as a mom of two young kids, like it was a grace, it was such a savior for us. And like, I don't think, once again, this goes back to pouring into the employee, right? If your employee can efficiently do the work, then you should take that into consideration. I think the more we stop looking at everything as a cookie cutter solution and really like a case by case, then you're going to get that longevity with your employees. You're going to get that feel good vibe. You're not going to get the grumpy people showing up every Monday. Maybe people will be excited to show up to work. And I think that's a great place to be. If you're there 8 hours of your life every day, why not?
And it goes, as you say, it goes back to the conversation we're having about replaceable, irreplaceable people and things like that. And it's like, it would be great if it was universal that we judged people on the quality of what they did, not the quantity. And obviously, a big part of performing at a quality level is having all these things in place. So to me, it's just a total no brainer for organizations and for the humans who work for them.
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of organizations and individuals fall into that comparison trap. Like, what are they doing? We need to be doing that. But you really need to take a step back and see, what's the culture of your business? Is it predominantly moms? Is it predominantly maybe working dads? And really look at it from that holistic standpoint. And then people will feel seen and heard. And who doesn't want to be seen and heard?
Exactly. So just as a final question, what would your sort of one piece of advice for 2025 be to people listening?
Ooh, anything, or going back to work, in the
Oh,
workplace?
just wellness in general, just in terms
Wellness
of
in
keeping
general.
people,
Prioritize yourself, Matt. I think
Yeah.
prioritize yourself. I think that's one of the biggest thing when I'm coaching women. I ask them what their top 3 priorities. Many times they're not in the top 3. Some have said their dog before them. Some always say their kids before them. Put yourself first. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of anyone else.
Fantastic. Nadia, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
Fantastic. So let's move to trending or ending. Hey. Hi, Rhona. How you doing? And hi, Tara.
Hello.
There we go.
So today, I really don't even want to call it a trend. I don't want to speak that into existence. But we're talking about recent executive orders and how that have directly impacted or like taken aim at DEI within federal agencies and the companies that contract them. And yeah, we're talking about here in the US. Really marks a significant shift that to me raises important questions, like for private companies that do care about DEI and that it is part of who they are. How can they remain compliant with these new regulations while still continuing to foster their beliefs in inclusion and equity? And what does that mean for employees? But because I'm not a DEI expert, I have absolutely no clue. I've brought my go-to person for all things DEI, which is Tara Turk-Haynes. Welcome, Tara. I am so excited that you agreed to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there?
Yeah, can you start by introducing yourself and letting us know what you do for the folks that don't know you?
Absolutely, and there are plenty of those. I am Tara Turk-Haynes, and I am the founder and consultant for Equity Activations. We help businesses embed equity into their operations so that they can have a stronger, healthier business outcome and do things authentically.
Perfect. So, from your perspective, like what's the immediate impact of these executive orders on like federal contracting agencies and really the broader business community?
Well, I think that, I mean, listen, a lot of us have been talking about this job market for the past couple of years, right? Like, there's some reports that are saying it's great, and many in the talent community can definitely tell you that it has not. This is not going to add anything great to that. We are talking about a lot of people who are about to lose their jobs. Many colleagues I've heard about who are coming into work and finding out they no longer have employment with an organization that they thought, right, would be around for a very long time. I've also had some consultants who've heard of consultants who've gotten their already scheduled events and trainings canceled hours or an hour before they're even supposed to leave them with some of these agencies on how to do things equitably. And so when we think about the immediate effect, all of us are affected. Either you have someone in your family, your friend circle, you who are connected to the massive organization called the federal government. We're all going to feel the impact of this, let alone being receivers of a lot of those resources from federal governments. Those are no longer going to be in existence. So I think we're in a really terrible position in terms of like how we're finding out how connected we are to this large, broad organization.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up all of the people losing their jobs because that's really a immediate impact that people are feeling, have already felt, and will continue to feel. So for private companies that are committed to DEI, how can they remain compliant with all of these new things without abandoning their core values of inclusion and equity?
Well, the first thing I want to say is if you're a company, definitely loop in your legal counsel immediately. Your legal counsel, your financial accounting department, as well, if you have receiving any kind of aid or you give out aid as well. You're a DEI person as well as your HR. This is going to be your Avengers, right? Because we are day 27 into the new year. We have a long road for a lot of things that could possibly happen. And I'm not going to say that they're all going to be terrible. We just don't know. There's a large cloud of ambiguity happening right now. These things we actually did forecast, a lot of us in the community of DE&I. But one of the things I want to make a clear distinction of, and I think this is where some of the problems lie, is that we did not define collectively what diversity, equity, and inclusion means for us as a community of people who are then operating in business, whether it's private or federal government. So when people start talking about DEI, I don't think we're all thinking about the same things. We are not always talking about quotas, which I think is what a lot of people are attacking, the quotas, right? DE&I is not just quotas. It can be a subset of that, but what you're actually talking about is looking at auditing your operations to see if it's equitable and fair for everyone. This is not just race and gender, which a lot of people seem to go to immediately. There are over 40 categories of social identities that fit into the DE&I construct. We're talking neurodivergence, veterans, we're talking about caregivers. There are so many different people. And so if you're a company that really is committed to making sure everyone is having an equitable experience within your organization, then your systems have to show up as that. So I'm not a huge fan of performative, grand gestures of, black boxes when George Floyd was murdered or any of those kinds of things. I think those are come and go. Those are initiatives. Those are extracurricular activities. What we're really talking about is solidifying our business so that it's a healthy business and it can withstand time, which means the people and the kinds of people and the groups that are growing within this country and even beyond this country, we are meeting them where they need to be. I always say that your candidates are your consumers are your employees. There is no compartmentalizing them, right? So how do we address those groups and make sure it's fair?
And I 100% agree with you that we weren't really operating on what is DEI. Like, there's no actual definition. How can we take steps to get there? Like, who
Yeah.
should be the person taking the lead on something like this?
So I don't even know if we can put, Pandora's box together at this point, right? I think what's most helpful right now is how do we as companies come together and basically say, this is what DE&I means to us internally, right? internally is so much more important than your press releases and your social media, all of those things. Your people internally need to know how you're going to care for them and how you're going to operate a business healthy. So if you're saying diversity to us means that we looked at it and we realized that we are not recruiting veterans as much as we need to. So what does that mean? We need to go where the veterans are. We need to make sure that we are collectively having a diverse slate of people. And that's another thing. People think diversity actually means like we've achieved some level of collective unity. Diversity is just different people in one place, right? Equity is the kind of making sure those people are having a fair experience across the board. So each company is going to be different, but make sure you're putting a plan together to say what that means for you, because no, it's not one size fits all for everyone.
Perfect. Matt, I'm interested to hear your perspective from like internationally looking out. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I think the overarching one is a kind of a sense of amusement. I think that's probably the first thing. I mean, I think that Europe has a very long way to go with all of this, but obviously there are laws and legislations and regulations and things like that have never really been questioned in the same way that it's being questioned in the US at the moment. And I think the other thing, which Tara kind of already mentioned, was what is the scope of this? And I'm interested to know what is the scope of the executive orders in terms of in terms of categories. Is it vague? Is it catch-all? What's the I suppose what's the scope of it, or do we not know until it pans out?
Well, I think there's a good distinction to be made here, and Heather Bussing, whose incredible voice in all things workplace equitable and compliance, makes sure to remind us these executive orders do not replace laws that are in place, right? Yeah. So right now we're not saying, and I think that's what we kind of need to understand is, when you're voting for politicians, you're not just voting for the most popular office in the land, you're voting for the trickle down of those things. And people who are responsible for those laws are primarily in those categories. The executive orders can reach actually the federal branch of, all of the United States. So if there are any kind of federal programs that are reliant on what they deem to be diversity, equity, inclusion, and again, they're thinking unfair practices, I think, geared towards people of color in the workplace, which are not actually founded on anything other than feeling and rather than facts, right? There is no idea that we can all pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But if you say that you can, and that is the environment that we have, then you're going to issue an executive order. So just because you say it doesn't mean that it's actually the correct environment. But this does affect other organizations. For example, I just heard that Harvard got rid of their slave study program recently, which was connecting the historical ancestors of people who are existing in this country now back to the founding of this country, because they are afraid of the targeted repercussions of an executive order. So there's a lot of just in case, right? We can always talk about Target. We can talk about all of these other companies who are doing this just in case we get this limelight on us. We're going to retreat. And they've been very public about it as well. So I think we're at a crossroads, right? How do people feel about the goods and services companies that are supposed to be servicing consumers rolling back things that benefit the consumers? We're talking about supplier diversity. We're talking about all of these different things that do affect the economy.
And also, I think that, so take this, say, from a neurodiversity perspective. And if you look at, inclusive hiring from a neurodiversity perspective, that benefits everyone. If you make an interview process and you rethink it to include, everyone and show everyone kind of in their best light, it actually makes recruiting better. So, I would hope that, do you think that, companies see that beyond, their maybe some of the performative things that they're saying or doing? Do you think that there's a core of that is understood?
I'm going to advocate for all of my fellow consultants in the space. Specifically, we talk about neurodiversity, and we're talking about Tamika Allen, which I know Rhona knows very well. We're talking about hopefully these companies doing this without the fanfare. So if you could just look at your processes, don't release a press release. You don't have to tell everybody what you're doing. Just audit your process. Make sure that it works for people who have not historically been successful. Use your data and make sure that you're embedding a better process. You don't have to. Listen. You can call DEI whatever you'd like. I don't have a connection to or soft spot for the language because I think we're getting semantical. I think we're really just talking about making your business better. And if you can do that, that's a business objective that every leader should have on their radar, no matter what. And that includes your people function. So make sure that you're just doing that, solidifying your business functions.
No, absolutely. Rhona, have you got any more sort of thoughts or questions on this?
Yeah, I think my only question is, and it's what I've heard, people are really wanting to know what they can do to avoid potential retaliation
Yeah.
for this. And I think that's really why they're being so public about we're not doing this. But
Yeah.
is there anything that companies can do, not publicly, but to avoid retaliation?
Again, like I said, get your vendors team together, talk to your legal team, talk to your HR team, talk to your accounting and finance, look at your processes. What do you have that's dependent on any kind of these regulations rolling through, and just auditing your process. You should do this at any moment when you have a crisis comms plan in place, right? Reviewing exactly what needs to be done. But again, if you're not performative, if you're not showcasing, putting a highlight on, just do the work quietly and internally, and making sure and calling it solidifying our business, right? Making sure your employees also feel like that you are committed to them having the best possible experience in the workplace. Your candidates feel that way as well. We don't have to stick to the same language, but we can change our workplaces, one step at a time, which is what we should be doing anyway. Aside from all of this, you should always be tweaking your process to make sure that your business is running better.
So I said I wasn't going to ask if this is trending or ending, but I'm going to take the liberty of saying that maybe it's trending, but the thing is, DEI isn't dead. It's not dying. I think companies understand the importance of it and that their benefits outweigh any potential retaliation or anything. So maybe it's trending, but what's really trending is that we're going to know the companies that really care about this because they're going to continue to do it.
Correct. I definitely advocate for that as well. The companies who, again, I say your consumer is your candidate, your employee, vice versa. All those groups talk, and if they have a great experience in your recruiting process or in your workplace, they're definitely going to advocate for you in the consumer space as well.
Perfect. Thanks,
100%.
Tara.
Thank you so much, Tara, for joining us. A pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you, Rhona. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, everyone who's been on this week's show. So that is us for another week. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for everyone who submitted comments as well. That's fantastic to see. We will be back next Monday, but there is lots of Purple Acorn joy for you in the meantime. So tomorrow is the HR morning show, 7 a.m. West Coast, 10 a.m. East Coast. And then on Wednesday, Hire Her, a Talent Collective podcast. That's 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. East Coast. My First Job with Mike Wood on Thursdays, 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And then From the Desk of Jada Montemorano on Fridays at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. That was this week's Alder Hour. And this is me, Matt Alder, clocking out.